I used to think small-town politics were bad back in Ohio. Then I moved to the Philippines and learned what happens when you accidentally fall in love with the wrong family's daughter. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a knife. It's a phone call from someone who controls everything you thought you understood about your new life. When you're 67 and starting over in a foreign country, you think you're too old to be naive. You're wrong. You're exactly the right age to become someone's perfect target. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by a retired teacher from Ohio who asked us to change some details for his safety, but wanted others to know what really happened. I never planned to fall in love again. After 38 years of marriage and a divorce that took half my pension, I figured I was done with all that. My ex-wife got the house in Akron. I got my teacher's retirement and a one-way ticket to anywhere but Ohio. I'd spent decades teaching American history to kids who barely looked up from their phones, watching the country change in ways that made me feel like a stranger in my own hometown. The Philippines seemed like the answer. Warm weather, low cost of living, English-speaking people who still respected their elders. I wasn't looking for some 20-year-old bar girl like the horror stories you hear online. I just wanted peace, maybe a little respect, and to make my money last long enough to die with dignity. The small town in Bataan province seemed perfect when I found it on Google Maps. Far enough from Manila to be cheap, close enough to civilization to feel safe. I rented a tiny concrete house for 8,000 pesos a month, about $150, with a small garden where I could grow tomatoes and pretend I was living the simple life I'd always dreamed about. The market in town became my daily routine. Every morning at 7, I'd walk the 4 blocks from my house to buy fresh fish, vegetables, and whatever else I needed. The vendors were curious about the tall white man with the Ohio accent, but friendly in that careful way people are with foreigners who might have money. I learned basic Tagalog phrases, smiled a lot, and tipped well. It felt good to be the generous American for once. Instead of the bitter divorced teacher counting pennies back in Akron, that's where I met Luz. She was standing at Maria's vegetable stall, arguing politely in rapid Tagalog about the price of tomatoes while balancing a box of school supplies in one arm. She wore a simple blue dress, no makeup, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. When she noticed me listening, she switched to English. "Excuse me, sir. Do you know if these tomatoes are good? I'm buying for my students' lunch program at school." Her English was clear but careful, with that soft Filipino accent that made everything sound musical. I helped her pick out the best tomatoes and we started talking. She taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, lived alone in a small apartment near the school, and had been sending money to her family in the provinces since she graduated college. "I studied education at the university in Manila," she told me as we walked toward the school. "But I came here because the children need good teachers, and the big city is too expensive for someone like me." There was something different about Luz from the start. She didn't ask where I was from or what I did for work. She didn't seem impressed that I was American or interested in my money. When I told her I was a retired teacher, her face lit up. "Really, what subject?" When I said history, she clapped her hands together. "My students are learning about World War II. Maybe you could come talk to them about America during the war?" I found myself saying yes before I even thought about it. The next week, I spent an hour with 38-year-olds telling them about Pearl Harbor and D-Day, while they stared at me with wide, curious eyes. Luz translated the parts they didn't understand, and I watched her face as she spoke to them. She was patient, kind, never raised her voice. After class, she thanked me with a shy smile. "The children loved your stories. You made history come alive for them." That afternoon, she let me buy her coffee at the small cafe near the school. We talked for 2 hours about teaching, about books, about the differences between American and Filipino students. When I walked her home, she said, "Thank you for today. It's been a long time since I talked to someone who understands what it's like to be a teacher." I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years, useful, wanted, like maybe there was a reason I'd ended up in this little town after. All the first month with Luz was like a dream I'd given up hope of having. She showed me her favorite places around town, the old Spanish church where she prayed every Sunday, the bridge over the small river where she liked to walk in the evenings, the tiny restaurant where they served the best pancit in the province. "This is where I come when I'm homesick," she told me one evening as we sat by the river. The water reminds me of the stream behind my family's house when I was little. She taught me Tagalog words, while I helped her practice English pronunciation. Your accent is very clear, she said. Much easier to understand than the British man who lived here before. I didn't ask what happened to the British man. I was too happy to worry about the past. Luz seemed genuinely interested in my stories about teaching, about Ohio, about traveling around the United States during my summer breaks. I always dreamed of seeing America, she said, especially the Grand Canyon. It looked so beautiful in pictures. She never asked about my divorce, never pushed for details about my pension or my house back in Ohio. She seemed content to take things slowly, to enjoy our evening walks and weekend trips to nearby towns. The locals started recognizing us as a couple. Magandang babae, they'd say about Luz, nodding approvingly. Beautiful woman. I felt proud walking next to her, this educated, independent Filipino woman, who chose to spend time with me not because I was American, but because she actually seemed to enjoy my company. When Luz asked if I wanted to meet her family properly, I was nervous but excited. They want to cook for you, she said. My mother makes the best adobo in Bataan. She's been asking about you since I told her we were dating. The family compound was a collection of small concrete houses connected by a shared courtyard, home to what seemed like 3 generations of Luz's relatives. Her parents, Ronaldo and Gloria, welcomed me with warm smiles and careful English. Welcome to our home, Sir Edward, Gloria said, using the formal title that Filipinos give to older men they respect. Luz tells us you are a good man, a teacher like her. The afternoon was filled with introductions, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, children running between the houses. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to meet me, asking polite questions about America, and nodding when I complimented their beautiful home. But I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. Ronaldo asked very specific questions about my pension. In America, teachers get good retirement, yes? You can live comfortable for many years? When I mentioned my house in Ohio, Gloria immediately wanted to know if I still owned it. Property in America is very expensive, I think. Very good investment. There were conversations in rapid Tagalog that stopped when I came near, followed by awkward silences and forced smiles. Luz seemed different around her family, quieter, more deferential, constantly translating and mediating. When I offered to contribute money for groceries, the family's enthusiasm was overwhelming. No, no, Sir Edward, Ronaldo said. You are our guest. But if you insist... The grateful looks they exchanged when I handed over 2,000 pesos told me I'd just passed some kind of test. 3 weeks after meeting her family, Luz came to my house in tears. I'd never seen her cry before, and the sight of her red eyes and trembling hands made my chest tight with worry. Edward, I'm so sorry to bother you with this, she said, sitting on my small couch and wrapping her arms around herself. But I don't know what else to do. Her younger brother Carlo needed money for college tuition, 50,000 pesos, about $900. The family had been saving for months, but they were still short. He's so smart, Edward. He scored so high on his entrance exams. But if we can't pay the tuition this week, he'll lose his spot. She was embarrassed to ask, kept apologizing and saying she understood if I couldn't help. I know we haven't been together very long. I know this is too much to ask, but Carlo is the first person in our family who might go to university. My parents sacrificed so much to get him this far. I didn't hesitate. $900 was nothing compared to the money I'd wasted on lawyers during my divorce. So of course I'll help, I said, pulling out my checkbook. Carlo sounds like a good kid. Education is important. Luz threw her arms around me, sobbing with relief and gratitude. I'll pay you back, she promised. As soon as I get my next salary, I'll start paying you back. I told her not to worry about it. The look on her face when I handed her the check was worth every penny. 2 days later, she called me with news. My father is so impressed by your generosity, she said. He's been telling everyone in the barangay about the good American who loves his daughter. People keep asking about you. I started noticing changes in how people treated me around town. The vendor at the fruit stand insisted on giving me extra mangoes. For Sir Edward, she said with a big smile. You are very good to our Luz. The owner of the hardware store offered me discounts on everything I bought. Children pointed at me on the street and whispered to their friends. When I asked Luz about it, she laughed. Word travels fast in a small town, she said. People know you helped my family. They respect you for taking care of me. It felt good to be respected, to be seen as someone generous and important instead of just another bitter old foreigner. But then Luz mentioned something that made me uncomfortable. The barangay captain wants to meet you, she said casually while we were having dinner. Captain Santos. He's very important around here. He controls permits, settles disputes, has connections everywhere. She explained that Santos had been asking about me, wanted to welcome me to the community properly. It would be good for you to pay your respects, she said. Especially since we're getting serious. Captain Santos protects people who are part of the community. I agreed to meet him, thinking it was just a courtesy call. In small towns, I figured, you had to respect the local authority figures. Luz seemed relieved when I said yes. He's a good man, she assured me. Very educated. He worked in Dubai for many years before coming back to help our barangay. What I didn't know was that Santos had already been asking detailed questions about the American who was dating Luz. Questions about my pension, my property, how much money I might have. I walked into that meeting thinking I was making a friend. I had no idea I was walking into a trap. Captain Reynaldo Santos had an office in the barangay hall that looked more like a businessman's study than a government building. Polished wood desk, leather chairs, air conditioning that actually worked. Santos himself was younger than I expected, maybe 50 with silver hair and an expensive watch. His English was perfect with just a hint of an accent. Mr. Edward, he said, standing up to shake my hand with a politician's firm grip. Welcome to our little community. I've heard wonderful things about you from the Cruz family. He seemed genuinely interested in my background, asking thoughtful questions about my teaching career and my impressions of the Philippines. You know, we don't get many Americans with your education level here, he said. Most foreigners who come to the provinces are, how do I put this diplomatically, not necessarily looking for intellectual conversation. We talked about books, about the history of the Philippines, about the challenges of rural education. I found myself liking him despite my initial nervousness. Then the conversation shifted. You know, Mr. Edward, our community has many needs, Santos said, leaning back in his chair. The elementary school where Luz works desperately needs a new roof. The medical clinic needs equipment. Our roads are terrible during the rainy season. He talked about community development, about how successful foreigners who invested in local projects were treated like family. When someone shows they truly care about our people, we take care of them in return, he said. Protection, assistance with government paperwork, help with any problems that might arise. I felt honored to be included in these discussions, but I also started sensing an underlying expectation. When I mentioned that I'd already helped Luz's family, Santos nodded approvingly. Yes, I heard about your generosity with young Carlo's education. That's exactly the kind of community spirit we value. As I left his office, Santos shook my hand again. I hope you'll consider being part of our community's future. Mr. Edward, I'll be in touch soon with some specific ways you might help. Over the next few weeks, I felt like I was being pulled into a current I couldn't control. First, Luz's family needed money for her sister's wedding. It's our tradition, Gloria explained when I visited for Sunday lunch. The eldest daughter must have a beautiful wedding to honor the family. But times are hard, and we need help with the expenses. The amount they mentioned, 30,000 pesos, seemed reasonable for a wedding, and I wanted to be supportive of family traditions. Then Santos called about the school roof project. We've received some donations from other community members, he said, but we're still short of our goal. Wouldn't you like to be the main sponsor? Your name would be on a plaque thanking you for your contribution to local education. Other community members started approaching me directly. Mrs. Rodriguez needed help with her husband's medical bills. The Delgado family wanted a loan to start a small business. Even the parish priest mentioned that the church needed funds for repairs. Sir Edward is so generous, people kept saying. He understands what it means to be part of our community. Luz seemed uncomfortable with all the attention, but when I asked her about it, she sighed. This is how things work in the Philippines, she said. When someone successful joins a community, people expect help. It's not greedy, it's survival. These families have no other options. I started feeling overwhelmed. But I didn't want to seem selfish or destroy my relationship with Luz. Each request seemed reasonable on its own, and I told myself I was investing in my new life. But my savings account was shrinking faster than I'd planned, and I was starting to worry about how long my money would last if this continued. The phone call that changed everything came at 2 in the morning. I fumbled for my cell phone in the dark, thinking it might be an emergency back in Ohio. Instead, I heard Santos's voice, but his tone was completely different from our friendly meeting. "Mr. Edward, I'm sorry to disturb you so late," he said, "but we have a serious matter to discuss regarding your visa status and your relationship with Miss Cruz." My blood went cold. "What kind of matter?" I asked, sitting up in bed. Santos explained that there had been concerns raised about my intentions in the community. "Some people are questioning whether your relationship with Luz is genuine," he said. "There are suggestions that you might be taking advantage of a local woman, using your financial position to exploit her." I was confused and frightened. "That's not true," I said. "Luz and I care about each other. I've done everything legally." "My visa is current." Santos made sympathetic noises. "I'm sure you're telling the truth, Mr. Edward, but you know how people talk in small towns. Once rumors start, they can be very damaging. We need to meet privately tomorrow to discuss how to resolve these concerns before they become bigger problems." Something in his voice made it clear this wasn't really about visa documentation or community gossip. This was about something else entirely. "Where do you want to meet?" I asked, already knowing I was stepping deeper into whatever trap I'd stumbled into. "There's a quiet restaurant outside town," Santos said. "We can talk privately there. Don't worry, Mr. Edward. These things can always be worked out between reasonable men." The restaurant Santos chose was nearly empty, just a few tables under a tin roof with a view of rice paddies. He was already waiting when I arrived, dressed casually but still radiating that same quiet authority. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Edward," he said, gesturing for me to sit across from him. I ordered us some coffee. "We have important things to discuss." He dropped all pretense of friendliness within the first few minutes. "Let me be direct with you," Santos said, stirring sugar into his coffee with deliberate calm. "You've become a valuable resource for this community. People have expectations now. They've seen your generosity, and they believe you're committed to being part of our family here." He leaned forward slightly. "But some community members feel you haven't fully demonstrated that commitment yet." I asked what he meant, though I was starting to understand. Santos smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You have a pension of about $2,000 a month," he said. "You own property in Ohio worth approximately $120,000. Your savings account currently has about $43,000. I felt sick. I'd never shared those specific details with anyone, not even Luz. "How do you know all that?" I asked. Santos waved the question away. "Information travels, Mr. Edward. The point is you have resources, and this community has needs. If you want to continue living peacefully here, if you want to maintain your relationship with Luz, you need to show that you're truly committed to our family." The threats were veiled, but clear. Visa problems, tax issues, potential safety concerns, all things that could make my life very difficult if I didn't cooperate. "Other foreigners in the area have found it much easier to just work with us," Santos said. "They understand that investment in the community is investment in their own security and happiness." That evening, I confronted Luz about Santos and the pressure I was facing. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She didn't seem surprised by what I was telling her. Instead, she became defensive. "Edward, you don't understand our culture," she said, pacing around my small living room. "In the Philippines, when someone joins a family, joins a community, they help each other. It's not about money, it's about belonging." I asked her directly if she'd been part of planning this from the beginning. Her face flushed red. "How can you ask me that? Do you think I'm some kind of criminal? Some kind of scammer?" But when I pressed her about her conversations with Santos and her family, the truth started coming out. "Okay, yes," she said finally. "My father and Captain Santos talked about how to help you become part of our community. But I really care about you, Edward. I really do." She admitted they'd discussed ways to encourage my generosity, but insisted it wasn't a scam. "These are real needs," she said. "Real families who need help. You have money that you're not even using. What's wrong with sharing it with people who have nothing?" The conversation escalated into a painful argument. I realized that while Luz might have genuine feelings for me, she'd also been complicit in a systematic plan to extract money from me. "You Americans are all the same," she said finally, her voice rising. "You come here with your dollars, acting like generous kings, but when people ask for real help, you call it a scam. You want to buy love and respect, but you don't want to pay the price." She stormed out, slamming my door so hard the windows rattled. I sat alone in my house, finally seeing the situation clearly for the first time. 2 days later, Santos called with an ultimatum. "Mr. Edward, the community has made a decision," he said in that same calm, business-like tone. "We need a substantial contribution to demonstrate your commitment to our family here. 500,000 pesos for the various community projects we've discussed, plus a monthly contribution of 25,000 pesos to support ongoing needs." The numbers hit me like a punch to the gut. 500,000 pesos was about $9,000, nearly a quarter of my savings. The monthly payments would be almost $500, a huge chunk of my pension. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Santos sighed as if he was disappointed in me. Well, that would be unfortunate. You see, there are many ways life can become difficult for foreigners who don't cooperate with local authorities. Visa problems, tax investigations, issues with your lease. Sometimes, unfortunately, even safety concerns. He mentioned other foreigners in the area who had initially resisted but eventually found it much easier to work with the community. "They're all very happy now," he said. "They understand that this is simply the price of living peacefully in paradise." I had 48 hours to decide. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator, trying to figure out my options. Even if I paid what Santos demanded, I knew the requests would never stop. They'd bleed me dry slowly, keeping me trapped with threats and emotional manipulation. The worst part was realizing how perfectly they'd played me. My loneliness, my need to feel useful and respected, my cultural ignorance, they'd used all of it against me. I made my decision that night. I wasn't going to let them destroy me slowly. The next morning, I started making quiet preparations to leave. I transferred most of my remaining money to my bank in Ohio, keeping just enough cash for travel expenses. I packed only essential belongings, clothes, documents, a few books. Everything else could stay. I didn't tell Luz or anyone else in the community what I was planning. I booked a flight to Manila, then to Los Angeles, then to Cleveland. As I was waiting for my taxi to arrive, I heard a knock on my door. It was Luz, her eyes red with tears. "Edward, please don't do this," she said, pushing past me into the house. "I heard you're leaving. You can't just run away." She begged me to stay, promised she could talk to Santos, work something out. "I love you," she said, crying. "I know I made mistakes, but I really love you. We can fix this." Looking at her, I felt a mixture of sadness and anger. Maybe she did have real feelings for me. Maybe she'd been caught between her family's pressure and her own conscience. But it didn't matter anymore. "Luz," I said as gently as I could, "I was never your boyfriend. I was never your future husband. I was a target. You might have feelings for me, but you were part of a plan to use me from the very beginning." The taxi honked outside. I picked up my bags and walked past her to the door. "Wait," she called after me. "What about us? What about everything we had?" I turned back to look at her one last time. "We never had anything real," I said. "You can't build love on lies, and you can't build a future on other people's money." The taxi ride to Manila was the longest 4 hours of my life, but with every mile, I felt the weight of fear and manipulation lifting from my shoulders. 6 months later, I'm back in Ohio, living in a small apartment and teaching part-time at a community college. It's not the retirement I planned, but it's honest work with honest people. I've had time to research what happened to me, and I learned some disturbing things. Luz had been in relationships with at least 2 other foreign men before me. A British retiree who left after losing about $15,000 to family emergencies. An Australian who lasted 8 months before fleeing in the middle of the night. Santos had been running this operation for years, using local women to target lonely foreign men with money. The pattern was always the same: genuine affection mixed with systematic financial manipulation, backed by veiled threats from someone with local authority. I don't think Luz was evil. I think she was trapped in a system that taught her to see foreign men as opportunities rather than people. But that doesn't excuse what she did, And it doesn't change the fact that I nearly lost everything because I was lonely and naive. People ask me if I'm bitter about the Philippines, if I hate Filipino people now. I don't. I met plenty of good, honest people there who had nothing to do with what happened to me. But I learned something important. Paradise always has a price, and sometimes that price is more than you can afford to pay. The biggest mistake I made wasn't falling for Luz or trusting Santos. It was believing that I could buy acceptance, respect, and love with money. I forgot that the most dangerous traps are the ones that give you exactly what you think you want, until you realize you're paying for an illusion. If you're thinking about starting over in a foreign country, looking for love or respect or a cheaper way to live, remember this. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And if people treat you like family before they know you, ask yourself what they really want from you. Because sometimes the price of paradise is everything you have left to lose,